Hello, humane marketers. Sarah Znakrocha here. Welcome to another episode of the Humane Marketing Podcast, a place to be for the generation of marketers who cares. This is the show where we talk about marketing your business in a way that feels good to you, is aligned with your values, and also resonates more with your conscious customers because it's not pushy, ethical, and also beautiful. So if you're a regular here, you know that I'm organizing the conversations around the 7 Ps of humane marketing. And if you're new here and this is your first time, welcome. I'm so excited you're here. You may want to download your one-page marketing plan with the 7 Ps of humane marketing in the form of a mandala at humane.marketing/one page, the number one and page. So again, humane.marketing/one page. And with that, with no further ado, let's dive into today's conversation. Hi, Alexander. So good to see you, speak to you today.
Wonderful to be here, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. I was on a webinar with you last week. That was amazing. And then, of course, as I mentioned in the intro, we met in person, which is like so rare nowadays, right? That you get to meet people in person. And we get to meet again actually tomorrow after this recording. So I'm looking forward to that. But let's share with my listeners a little bit of the conversations that partly from your webinar, also from your book that you so kindly shared with me. And I entitled this conversation, I can't remember the exact words, but something about money and masculine energy, because that's what I feel like you bring to us, right? This kind of dance between the feminine and the masculine, and what that has to do with money, how art comes in as well, because you are an artist. So yeah, let's dive in. Why don't you start with kind of like an excerpt of the story that you shared in this webinar I was on last week. I think it was called The Path of Prosperity, right? That was the title. Yeah, so start us out there.
Wow. The pathway of prosperity is a model that emerged in Switzerland last year. I was working with a group of pioneers, and one of my business partners, a guy called Peter Koenig. And Peter looked at our relationship to money and has looked at it for the last 30, 40 years. And he discovered some really, really interesting things when he looked at our relationship to money. And the modern conception of money was created and designed by some very conscious people 250 years ago, around the time of the Industrial Revolution. And the Industrial Revolution kind of represents the extreme of the masculine end of the pathway. So there's a feminine end to the pathway, and you'd have to go back 200,000 years really to the dawn of humankind in the Great Rift Valley in Africa, or at least that's one history you could say. And that was kind of all feminine energy. So what is feminine energy? Feminine energy is being in connection. And if you've ever been in a real state of flow, you feel that you're in connection with something greater than yourself. And somehow the energy of creativity flows through you. So just go to a moment like that. Maybe it was a moment you were deeply in love with somebody in front of you, or a moment that you created a painting and it just hours flew by, or you finished a report. At that moment, actually, the mind isn't really very active. You're just kind of in a state of connection or in a state of communion. And then the opposite end of that is the industrial age. And the industrial age, we've gone from kind of being connected to all of it to being a cog in a wheel. And the pathway, we actually talk about the pathway all the way from this to this, but that takes about an hour. So I'm not going to do that in this conversation. Let me start at this end and let's work our way back. So this is the pathway of separation, moving from being connected to disconnected, from being part of all of it to being a cog in a machine. And so if we look at the industrial age, what did we say? We said, well, life expectancy was pretty short, 30 to 50 years in most advanced countries in the world. And how do we increase our health? And so some very, very conscious people actually designed a system, a financial system, in order for that to happen. And it included things like interest rates. But the externalities of that, according to Peter's research, are two things. One is extraction of people, extraction of the resource of people, in other words, that led to the idea of the cog in the wheel. And the second is the extraction of raw materials. And those two externalities at the beginning, they were okay, because if you look at the numbers are incredible. Like life expectancy went up, quality of life went up extraordinarily. And those numbers don't lie. It's not like somebody's faked those numbers. I was looking at the work by Hans Rosling, the Mind Gap. You can go and see it, mindgap.org. Incredible. It literally shows how you increase the amount of earning and the life expectancy increases. In other words, there is a direct correlation between those two. Right. And yet that system also divided us. So it was a system of silos. Think of the traditional factory. Even a factory today, it divides things down into silos. And so that was the system 250 years ago. And there's some organizations that still follow it today, the UN, not far from where you and I are sitting right now. It follows a silo-based mentality. Governments, they follow a silo-based mentality. Education, in class, we get taught maths, very separate from science. And that's very separate from, art and languages. And yet today, when we look at the challenges we face, they're horizontal challenges, not vertical challenges. Right. And so that kind of model started to evolve. And about 100 years ago, it evolved from the silo-based system, which we call the control system, into the compete system. And the compete system, not just vertical lines, you add in the horizontal lines. So you see this in big business. Everything divided from the factory line into departments and teams. Right. Mm-hmm. And you kind of have groupings in organizations. And then what we started to see about 20, 30 years ago is a kind of emergence of something which can be traced back way before this, but the role of the individual in the organization. And the philosophy shifted. And the philosophy shifted from over here in this model, the control and the compete model. It was all about what was good for the organization was good for the individual. It's very paternalistic, top down. And this one started to become a little bit more feminine. It said, well, actually, what's good for the individual is good for the organization. We started to see that in Silicon Valley. So, the growth of Silicon Valley was predicated on the idea of giving people time to do what they were passionate about. Think of Google. They said 1 day a week, 20% of your time, you can do whatever you're passionate about. And that led to Gmail and Google Maps and Google Calendar. And 50% of the innovation and AdWords, 50% of the innovation from Google came from that 20% time. And yet what we're getting to see now, 20, 30 years into the massive rise of the internet, is the limits of that system. And a new system has been emerging for 20, 30 years behind the scenes. And what we're now seeing is these systems, which are all a variant, a different flavor, vanilla, chocolate, strawberry, let's say. And we're now seeing that actually ice cream isn't the answer.
Well, I'm going to interrupt you there then. So if we continue this ice cream analogy, what is the answer though? And also, what does that have to do with our money story?
Yeah, great question. Well, I'm at risk, of course, continuing the analogy and saying, well, we all get fat and get addicted to sugar.
That's true. And if you continue there, it's like, well, money makes you fat, it's like fat in terms of like too much.
Well, exactly. And you're spot on, because what is really happening? Where is the money in the world? Well, it's in these three systems. So it's in government bonds, it's in government treasury, it's in big business, and it's in Silicon Valley. And more money has been printed in the last 10 years than has ever been in existence in
Right.
the entire history of humankind. And 40% of that wealth, 40% of the world's wealth is owned by 10 men. And I used to be able to get even more on my high horse on this and say 10 white men, but actually there are now 2 Indian gentlemen who are in the top 10 men. And despite that, all the other organizations in the top 10 were founded in Silicon Valley. So you've got this lake, if you like, of wealth, and it sits in these 3 systems. Think of a dam, right? And behind the dam you have a lake, and it's literally held here, and it's being hoarded,
right?
And the money is not flowing,
Right.
It's not flowing out of the dam. It's jammed behind the dam, and that isn't very natural. Dams are not natural things. There are no natural dams in nature. There's no hoarding in nature. There's nothing in nature that actually hoards anything. If you look in, okay, so bears hibernate, squirrels hibernate, but what they do is they store the food that they need to get through the winter. That's not hoarding.
Right.
Storing is, okay, I'm going to just keep enough that I need with me. And as nomads, we did the same. We just carried what we needed at that moment. If you've ever been backpacking, the first day you go backpacking, you're like, oh, damn. I was wondering whether I could swear there. I've bought too much stuff. I don't need all this stuff. So then you kind of start throwing away stuff.
Right.
And then you thin down your rucksack. You're like, this is what I need. This is all I need.
So yeah, you're saying basically the money is all held in behind that dam. The question I guess I have is like, well, what do we, the people, what can we do as the people? Because you started to talk about this journey, right? And you basically showed us history. So the question is this history a linear path and things just keep going worse and worse? Or, and I think I remember from the webinar, of course, it's not a linear path. It's this shape of the figure 8 and the infinity sign. So tell us about the return of how it's going to change, basically.
Yeah, well, it looks like it's linear. It really does.
It
looks like we're
does,
heading towards complete collapse. And
right now, most people are going to tell you, well, Alexander, I don't know, but right now it doesn't look like there's any return.
Yeah, it doesn't look good. I mean, we're recording this, aren't we? Just after the Silicon Valley Bank has just collapsed. We're recording at the same time as UBS has just made an offer to buy Credit Suisse.
Right.
We're recording at a time that the Economist is saying that there's $100 billion in the US banking system missing.
Wow.
But that's an unwanted gap. And I remember back in 2007, 2008, the beginning of the financial crisis, and Lehman Brothers collapsing, and I'm sure you do as well. And it kind of feels like we're at a similar time, and yet I am less concerned about it than ever. And some people, watching were like, "What, you crazy?" I'm like, "No, actually, this is absolutely what is being called forward." And so there is a world beyond this, and in fact, it's an incredibly exciting and amazing world. And everyone says, "Oh, the system's going to collapse." Jared Diamond's book, if you've ever read that, about civilization collapse. Oh, the whole thing is going to fall down. Well, maybe. But the dam, actually, there are people standing on both sides of the dam. So let's take it from the global to the specific. Let's take it from what's happening at a societal level, and let's focus it on an individual level, because this model you're talking about,
that's a great idea. Because I was just going to say that, because it's a bit out there, right? And it's like, okay, it would be great if we can talk about, well, what does that mean to us? So take us there.
So some of us are standing on this side of the dam, and we've got big fat bank accounts, and we're like, I'm scared of spending my money because the collapse is coming. If I read the papers, watch the news, read The Economist or whatever, the system's about to collapse. So I need to look after my money. Right. In other words, we're hoarding more because we're afraid. And then there are people on the other side of the dam who are kind of looking at the dam going, oh, there's no money coming to me. And so some of us are on this side of the dam and we're like, the river's dried up. There's a drought. There's no money flowing to me. How do I avoid this? Well, maybe I need to climb back up and get this side and go back into this world. Maybe I need to go back into the world of business and get a job and just stop trying to create this new system, whatever this new system is. And then those of us who are in it are like, am I going to lose my job? So we've got these kind of two different mentalities going on. And Peter puts it like this: there are some of us who are unconsciously pushing money away, and some of us who are running after money unconsciously. So let me kind of unbundle that. Mm-hmm. You can actually see this in your own life. Like either money is flowing, there's money in your bank account, or there's not money in your bank account. You can literally look at it and you could diagnose what's going on by the health of your bank account. Now, the secret here is about flow. And you mentioned that this is an infinite loop, the figure of 8 turned on its side. It's actually an infinite loop. And the secret is very simple. The dam is actually a belief system held in mind. The dam is actually in our mind. And it's an unconscious thing. You're like, no, it really exists. Like 40% of the world's wealth held by 10 people. Like you can't deny that, that the money is all in here and it's not here. Well, actually, that's not true, because there are people over here I know, and we could talk about at length, and they have all the money they need flowing through them and flowing through their bank accounts. And they genuinely are creating the new world. So what is the difference between those people and you and I? Why is the money flowing through their bank accounts and not through all of our bank accounts? And why is the money stuck here? And actually what we find is that most of us have part of ourselves here and part of ourselves here. So in fact, we're doing a little bit of both all the time. We're kind of hoarding onto the money that does come in because we're afraid of the drought. And we're looking at the money saying, when is the money going to flow to us? And so a lot of the work we do is about helping people to break down this mental barrier, this mental dam, so that the money flows again. And so that ultimately prosperity flows. And the natural design of nature is everything in flow. It's not building dams, it's not building restrictions.
Yes, I hear you, Alexander, but my rational mind has a lot of questions, because you just went through explaining, the kind of system we are in right now. And that 10 men basically own 40% of the wealth. And they are not the ones that I would say represent the feminine energy, or even like dual energy, right? They're the patriarchal, kind of not the nicest people on earth, I would say. And I don't care that they own that much. So the question is, if you're saying, okay, it's just in our mind, well, it's not. It's a reality. And so the thing is, what I want you to talk about is, kind of this concept of owning the masculine energy, yes, as well, and probably more like where we're headed, because yes, clearly right now it's not the case. Yes, it's like we're not at this point yet where money flows to everyone. It's just you yes, just showed it yourself. So yes, take us to owning these both energies and yeah, what that could look like.
Look, that's such a good question, and brilliantly put. And just to be clear, I'm not saying that the 10 white men or the 8 white men and 2 Indian men are in our mind. I'm saying the dam is in our mind.
Right. Yes.
Right. So the dam is what is in our mind, which is blocking the flow. And you mentioned going into the feminine energy. So let's look at it from this perspective.
Yeah.
Because it's easier to look from down here, looking up at the dam. But if we go all the way into the feminine energy over here, we are not separate from the whole. We are part of Mother Nature. We are part of it. We are an integral part of it. We're not separate from it. The separation only happens in mind. So the only part of ourselves that can sense the separation is our mind. But our essence, whatever we call it, is not separate from the whole. It's an integral part of the whole.
Right.
So if we look at it from this perspective, and then we look at these 8 white men and 2 Indian gentlemen, and we talk about the patriarchy as you just did, and then we have all this kind of stuff coming up inside ourselves, and we're like, I really don't like those people. Now, choose the person in that system that you like the least. Think of that person, that leader, that individual in that system, whether he's an entrepreneur. I'm going to say he because undoubtedly it's a man in a male form, right? So probably a business leader, maybe a politician, but just bring to mind that person. It doesn't have to be in North America. It could be somewhere in Europe. Could be somewhere in Russia. It could be somewhere in the East. Right? So just bring to mind that person, and then think of the thing that you like least about that person. What trait do you like least about that person? You know, is it corruption? Is it bullying? Is it misogyny? Is it lying? Is it cheating? Is it manipulating? Is it bullying? What is it? What is that
above,
trait?
yeah.
Okay, all of the above, right?
Yeah.
And you could write a long list.
Right.
Here's the scary thing. When you look at it from the feminine energy, that is part of us. If we are part of the whole, they are also part of the whole, and they are part of us. And this is a horrible, horrible thing, a horrible realization, because you're suddenly like, oh shit, what? Really? No. Because the mind will then go, no, that's ridiculous. I've done my work. I've done my own work. That's how I got here. Don't be so ridiculous. I worked out my purpose 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I've been doing spiritual development work. I've been doing personal development work. I've been doing all this work for the last 15, 20 years. My whole life has been dedicated to this work. Don't be so ridiculous. There's part of me stuck over here. Well, if we are on the planet right now, the bad news is there is. There is an aspect of us that is holding this system in place, that's holding this dam here, this dam in our mind. So what can we do about it? And this is where you're absolutely spot on, that actually we need to re-embrace this masculine energy over here. And you know, Carl Jung talked about this idea of the shadow. You know, what's held in the shadow. Well, what's held in the collective consciousness of the planet right now is primarily masculine energy, because this hasn't been going on for 250 years. It's been going on for minimum 5,000 years, probably 10,000 years. Probably you can trace it all the way back to the moment that, 5,000 years first civilization in Sumer, where we started to create hierarchies and ziggurats and money and all these things. Or 10,000 years, the moment that we settled down and we said, actually, we can cultivate crops and we can domesticate animals. In other words, we're a little bit above nature. Or you could trace it back 40,000 years and say, actually, it was the moment that the prefrontal cortex, you know, mutated and gave us consciousness, and the moment that the larynx gave us the ability to talk. So each of these moments are kind of moments of separation along this journey. And now here we are at this moment in history right now, the most amazing moment possibly ever in human history to be alive right now. And most of us still have this wall. The wall will dissolve. It will, it's inevitable for some of us. And those of us who do will just go on this infinite cycle within this life. And for those of us who don't, we'll go on this cycle not in this life.
Yeah. I like that. I think so. You kind of talked about the masculine energy and embracing that. I think in your book, but also in the webinar, you also talk about the ego, right? And it's part of that, those shadows that we need to look at. And in some of the self-help, more self-development, personal development things, you hear, well, you just need to let go of the ego, and that's how you're coming to this feminine energy. You instead say, well, don't let go of it, look at it and embrace it, and yeah, commune with it in a way, right? And I think that's exactly what's happening now as well. In on the bigger scheme, is all of that ego stuff is coming up, and we're having to look at it as a society, and the big kind of people that we talked about with all the wealth, well, that's really coming up for them specifically right now. And so what you're saying is not completely let go of it, but take, I guess, the good things from the ego with you, so that you can then apply those. Let's kind of bring it to a business owner level, because my listeners are entrepreneurs, right? And I do feel like a lot of, I'm talking to heart-centered entrepreneurs. So already that kind of says, well, they're a lot in the feminine energy, which is great, right? Which is exactly what we need more of. So we're on this pathway back to the feminine energy. And what you're saying, and I'm saying it as well in different words, because I talk about the doing and the being, the yin and the yang, right? We need both energies to be an entrepreneur and to, stay grounded and claim our worth, and yeah, do sell, right? To sell, we need some of that masculine energy as well. So yeah, tell us a bit more about the ego, and what good parts are in the ego, right, that we can bring back to business.
Oh, beautiful. Great question. Well, let's take this model actually and flip it up, right? So this figure of 8, and let's flip it this way. And
okay, so
let's now imagine
standing straight.
it's now standing straight, right?
Yeah.
And the base is the feminine, and the top is the masculine.
Mm-hmm.
And now let's imagine that's a tree, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is your tree and your business.
Mm-hmm.
And what you want to do is you want to attract more trees into your forest, more trees into your community.
Right.
And the bigger your forest grows, the more sustainable it becomes. So trees that grow in forests live far longer than trees that are isolated on their own on hilltops. So let's assume that what you're trying to do is build a forest, a sustainable forest. It doesn't have to be the biggest forest in the world, but it's a sustainable forest. It's a heart-centered forest. And at the heart of this forest is the mother tree, right. Your tree. Now, if you think about that forest, and let's say it's currently a copse, or maybe it's a wood, but actually its potential is to grow to a forest. Or maybe you're just starting out and you've literally just sowed the seed and it's a seedling or a sapling, but you know the potential of it is not just to grow into a tree, it's actually to grow into a forest. And of course, what you do is you go through growing pains. So let's see, if you're a sapling, you may be blown away around by the wind. And what we often focus on is we try and grow the tree. Right? You can imagine this, like you're a little seedling and you're like, grow faster, and you're like literally trying to pull the seedling.
Clients, more
clients, more, grow this way.
Mm-hmm.
And of course that doesn't work. You literally just pull the seedling out of the ground, or you'll pull the sapling out of the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So what stops you from doing this is the roots. And in fact, the height of the tree is dependent on the depth of the roots. And don't worry, I'm going to get to this thing about the ego.
Right.
So let's assume that the roots is the feminine. The roots is in connection with all of it, what we call the purpose. And the tree is your mission. This is what you're growing towards. And you want all the other trees to grow towards this mission. And that creates a microclimate underneath, which sustains life, because it's not too hot, it's not too cold. It helps the to conserve the water that all the trees need, the nutrients that all the trees need, the minerals that all the trees need, and then they share this underneath. So the height of the tree is dependent on the depth of the roots. The sustainability of the forest is dependent on the consistency of the canopy. But what stops the roots from growing deeper are rocks. Now, most people will tell you to remove rocks. When you see a block, you remove the block. When you see the dam, you take the dam out. But what if the rocks had helped you to get here? See, if you were to remove all the rocks under a forest, the trees would become unstable and then they'd fall over. Yeah. But actually, if the roots wrap around the rocks, then the tree becomes more stable.
Yeah.
And the whole forest becomes more stable.
It reminds me of what we just said before recording, no pain, no gain, right? The rocks are the pain here. The rocks are the dark nights of the soul. So, yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. And in our research, we've identified 4 different types of pain. Pain around money, which we've just been talking about. We're either mentally hoarding it, or we're mentally, we're in a scarcity mindset. So we're pushing it away mentally, or we're running after it. Power, relationship to power. So either we're standing at the top of the dam, or we're standing at the bottom of the dam. And in order for somebody to be standing at the top, there has to be somebody standing at the bottom. In other words, in order for you to have power over somebody unconsciously has to accept to have power over them. Right. Or as my partner Jean-Philippe puts it, obedience is the key to power. Mm. The third rock that we look at is love, because most of us were brought up in a world of fairy tales, Grimm's fairy tales, where the prince and the princess lived happily ever after, which implies that you are happy ever after when you find your soulmate. And so we've reinterpreted that modern myth as you can only be happy when you find your soulmate, which implies that love is outside of you. And of course, those of us who've done personal development work, and a lot of it, know that actually it's inside of us. And yet there are still remnants of that old model because it's so deeply embedded in society. Mm. And then the fourth area is time. That we constantly perceive we're running out of time and we've got to do things by this time. And so these are the 4 rocks, or we procrastinate. And these are the 4 rocks that we find underground. And what we've explored and examined is how you can embrace these different rocks, because in them is, first of all, the secret of how you got here. Your tree grew, you grew because the rock was there. And if you really embrace it consciously, and this is the difference, most of us are kind of embracing it or resisting it unconsciously. And because we're embracing it unconsciously, we're not really embracing it, we're pushing away from it. So if you take you mentioned being very practical in business. Let's say we are unconsciously pushing money away. Let's come back to money. We are running a program around money. So we think money is bad, or money is our security, or money is our freedom. And that, in Carl Jung's words, is a projection. So we're not seeing money as money. We're seeing money as a vehicle to something, freedom, or away from something, corruption. And when we actually embrace the freedom with or without money, we actually become truly free. Mm. But we can't
I think in the book,
free. Yeah, go on.
Sorry. Yeah. I think in the book you mentioned surrender, right? And that, I think, is a big piece of that journey, is to, just surrender to the rocks. And does that mean surrender to the ego as well? Because we started this track with the ego. So does that mean surrender to your ego as well?
Yeah, great question. I would say more surrender to the feminine.
Mm.
But in the surrender, what most of us forget is that the feminine, to take this easel behind me, right? The canvas here, so this is a painting, it's a painting of Mont Blanc, painted a few years ago in black, and it was pretty windy up there. I think it's, what, 3,000 meters, so 9,000 feet. And it's pretty windy. And when the canvas is moving, it's very difficult for the feminine to feel like she can come out and play. So the feminine creates, Mother Nature creates. The divine, at birth is normally through the feminine form. Like, new life comes onto the planet through the feminine form. And so when the canvas is held, the feminine can come out to play. So the masculine is the easel, and it's holding. And normally I tie with string from the corner so that the canvas is completely held. And if the canvas is held, then the feminine has the confidence to come out to play. So the feminine aspect of us needs the masculine at a certain level of awareness.
Right.
It needs to be held in that way. And that's where most of us are right now. And most of us have observed masters, and we're like, look at Nelson Mandela or Mother Teresa, and we observe no ego. Look at Eckhart Tolle, no ego. Or the Dalai Lama, we're like, there's no ego there. The ego's gone. So we look at it and we go, oh, I know what I need to do. I need to get rid of the ego. I need to get rid of the rocks.
Right.
But actually, that's like trying to climb a ladder by removing the rungs. So when you get to the top of the ladder, you don't need the ladder. But in order to get to the top of the ladder, you needed the rungs in the ladder. So most of us look at that state and we think, well, what I need to do is I need to remove the ego in order to reach the top of my mountain. Actually, it's the inverse. The rungs of the ladder are embracing every aspect of ego and finding the gold in the rock, because there's gold in each of these rocks. And when you realize there's a benefit in, I don't know, security, and you find the conscious benefit in that, the gold dust in that, you climb up a rung. And then you keep doing this. It's a very long ladder, by the way. Right? Really, really long ladder. And you can go on and on and on and on and on. Like it feels like it's infinite.
Right.
But at a certain point, you reach the top of the mountain. You're like, oh my God, I'm here. Then you don't need the ladder. But you do need the ladder to help other people get to the top of the mountain. So this is when you build ladders for other people.
Right. So once you build your ladder, you can then help other people. Yeah. Yeah. I see how you tie in the rocks and the ego, and that the point is not to let go of the ego, but to embrace it, because we need both of these energies, right?
Yes.
Maybe just to kind of bring it down again to the level of the individual, the entrepreneur. What I see a lot in the entrepreneurs that I work with is that, and I think in your book you call it the woo-woo mountain, right? And I have my woo-woo prompts in the Marketing Like We're Human book. So I think it's very much needed today that we can go into the woo, and that we can, embrace our feminine energy. But you and I both make the point also to say, yes, and you do also need the masculine energy to build a business. There's just certain things, even in marketing, you need to look at your numbers, like all of these kind of left brain things. Those are the masculine energy, and we need those for building businesses. And we need those even for, it's a structure. Like you said, the easel is the structure. It's kind of like, we need both. We need the roots, which you said was the feminine, and then we need some kind of system or structure. I love that. Yeah. Thanks so much for taking us on that journey. What I'm curious, kind of to wrap up, what I'm curious about is this return. And we kind of briefly touched upon it, the communion. What you mentioned also is these different business models. So we started with industrial revolution. Now we're kind of still in the big corporate systems. So where is this going? What do you see as a new paradigm in terms of business and humans? How are we evolving?
Yeah, so the big leap beyond the dam, if we kind of put the tree back and actually the other way around, and we have the infinite loop, then the big leap beyond the dam is a leap into what is variously known as a teal organization. It's a kind of decentralized organization, but most people have misunderstood the decentralized organization, and they think we go into co-creativity and we immediately jump to communion. There is a step in between. There's a rung in the ladder in between this current system, Silicon Valley system, which is still extracting wealth, and this new emergent system before you get to communion. So the future is communion, and that's one end of the cycle. And then there's the other, and really what you're looking for is a constant flow between them. So in order for that constant flow to happen, you'd have to reclaim these positives, as you said over here. So what's the positive of the control system? Discipline, structure. What's the positive of the second system? Focus, like steely focus on whatever you call that thing is, your mission or the uniqueness, your promise. What's the third thing? The third thing is about shifting our mindset. It's about unlocking our mindset and moving towards a mindset where things can grow. But the real leap is here. This is the leap. This is the leap that's emergent. And it's like it builds on all of these. We think it's linear, but actually it's like the Russian dolls. So this is an outer Russian doll, and then there's another Russian doll here. And this one, to get to this one, you have to accept all of these phases. And what that means is that it's not co-creation. That's delusional woo-woo mountain stuff. That it occurs because somebody is holding the space, what my partner Peter calls the source. There's an easel there holding the canvas for everyone else. And so there's this famous book by Frederick Laloux, called Reinventing Organization, which kicked off the whole co-creativity movement and became a cult classic in 2015. And when Peter interviewed Fred, because he knows him very well, he said, Fred, you only interviewed sources, didn't you? And Fred's like, yes. In other words, he was observing the canvas, but not realizing the role that the sources, the people, the founders of the business were playing as the easel. What does that mean? It means without the holding at this level, without the masculine, strong masculine energy, and I draw it as a map like this with bubbles inside, without the arms holding the space, without that discipline, without that focus, without that structure, the whole thing falls into a mess. And I launched a company based on the idea of co-creation. I was the source of it. I had some incredible partners, really, really impressive people, and it collapsed. We never made any money. There was never any flow in it. So in order to create this system, we have to embrace the shadow of the masculine. And the shadow of the masculine is encompassed in the worst of the people who we see running this system. And so I am incredibly optimistic, but it's not even optimism. I know that some of us are already doing this, and I see what's being created, and it is phenomenal what is being created. I mean, I was speaking to my friend Heath yesterday. What Heath is up to, unbelievable. I mean, I can't give any details out at the moment, but you can feel the energy of what he's doing. I'll give you one example. So Carrie, 25 years in the UN, has created a parallel organization to the UN called United Cities. You can Google it. She is now the source of a $13 billion fund to realize the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. Her mission is 10,000 cities by the end of the decade. She will do it. I know she will. She's operating from that level of awareness. That's just one example but there are
Let's go
dozens of
back to
examples.
the individuals, the entrepreneurs who are listening, because that's kind of like a high level example. Because I do have to say, I'm like, well, here I am always talking about co-creation and collaboration, and you just come in and say, well, that's not working. So what's the alternative then? Because if the ultimate goal is communion, then what's the alternative if not collaboration?
So collaboration is key, but the key to get to the communion is to appreciate that each of us have a role in that collaboration, and each of us are tapping in as a source into something greater, whatever we call that. So the collaboration happens because each of us, take a marriage, right? In a marriage, you have two people, and we talk about us as a something, but actually each of us are independent beings. And we used to say in the old system, we used to say, well, when you find your perfect partner, you create perfect harmony, the beast with two backs. But actually, we know that doesn't work, because when the person is not there, they miss the other person. Actually, what we're talking about here, true collaboration, is this: both individuals become whole, complete and whole. And the dance between those individuals is to help each other become whole. And then what you get, of course, is an infinite loop and freedom in between. Mm-hmm. And this is what true collaboration is. So each person sourcing what they're there to source, and being really, really clear that one is playing the role of the easel and holding the space, and the other is doing the creation in there. So it's a nuance of collaboration. It's not saying forget co-creation, forget collaboration. It's a nuance to it that integrates the masculine world over here into the emergent world. Because again, it's the Matryoshka doll. You don't embrace this world falls apart, and it never actually gains the traction that it needs. So that's the distinction. So is it happening? Yes. What does practically that mean for an individual operating from this space? It means practically actually looking back into the world that you might be in resistance to and you might have rejected, and not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and seeing the gold dust in that. And then accepting that gold dust, embracing that gold dust, reclaiming the strong samurai, that the masculine energy in you, in order to do that holding, knowing that beyond that is communion. But you can't miss that rung on the ladder. You miss that rung on the ladder, you don't get to the top of the mountain. The whole thing falls apart. The tree falls over.
Yeah, totally. I see you talk so beautifully, and I feel sometimes I'm kind of like the translator who brings it down to the level of kind of the grounded level. I'm a Capricorn, and so I'm like, okay, very straightforward, and so in a way, I can also make a parallel to my own journey, and I know you shared it in your book. About your journey to the woo-woo mountain, right? And the artist and all of that. And then from there, coming back to the yang energy. And I'm a Capricorn and a Cancer rising. So I really have these both things, I call myself the mama bear of the humane marketing circle. So I have this Cancer energy that is very feminine, very woo-woo, right? But then at the core, I'm a Capricorn. I'm very down to earth and structured. And so it's almost like I wanted to get rid of those things and rid of the mind. And I'm like, no, I have to be, very meditative and in this state of woo all the time. And yeah, it didn't work. Like, I'm like, no, I need both. And that's what we're constantly talking about as well. And in humane marketing, you need both the doing and the being. So beautifully said. You have definitely a way with words and making these parallels that it's such a journey, right? It's the journey of transformation, basically, is what you're talking about, and it's a journey of the money journey, but then of course, everything kind of goes back to money, and it's our journey as humans and as entrepreneurs.
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's those two, being and doing.
Right.
And the doing comes from a state of being,
Right. Yeah.
which I know
And
you
that's
talk
why we need
about.
to start with the being, right?
We do need to start with the being. We do need to unlock this because we've been in a state of doing for way too long.
For too long. Yeah.
When we jump into the being, and it was Einstein who said, let's call this the intuition, this the intellect. He said, the intellect is a faithful servant, and the intuition is a sacred gift. And if we can understand that it's the gift that uses the intellect, that uses the mind, it's like a tool in the toolbox.
Mm-hmm.
And when it uses it, actually you can create whatever you want. But most of the time, it is the mind's trying to suppress and forget this sacred gift.
Yeah.
And that really is the infinite journey, is realizing the gift, using the tool in order to create. And this journey, it's the journey of creation.
Yeah.
It's the journey of humankind. It's any painting, any masterpiece, that's the journey.
Yeah. Thanks so much for being here and taking on us on this journey, Alexander. Really appreciate it. Please do share where people, I think you run these webinars on a regular basis. So I think the best idea is probably for people to actually attend this webinar so that they can see you in action, and do share about that and the book and your website and all of that.
Yeah, sure. Well, we will be running another webinar on the 20th of April, Pathway of Prosperity, where we'll be going into this a little bit more detail. I don't know whether this episode comes out before then or not, but if it does, then great, sign up and join us. You can also find my book, a free chapter of my book on my website, alexander-inchbald.com. And then, yeah, we're just about to launch a community which you can join. And then we'll have regular conversations on a monthly basis. And then we run a series of retreats, the Masterpiece retreats, which are online and offline. We just off to Japan to run a retreat in Kyoto, which I'm pretty excited about. We're doing the first men's retreat in May in Morocco, which again I'm really excited about. We'll be going up to see Kauri, who I mentioned earlier, in Norway, and then we'll be running something in Switzerland in October. And then we do online retreats as well, called Masterpiece Tribes, and we're on the 11th tribe. 12th tribe will be in June. So lots of amazing things happening. And if any of that speaks to you, then come along, get some of the free information. There are lots of videos on the site as well, and you can get lost in the videos and learn as much as you need to. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks so much for being here. I always have one last question, and that is, what are you grateful for today or this week?
You.
Thank you. I'm grateful for you too. Thank you. Thanks for creating masterpieces.
Likewise, thank you for creating your masterpiece. That's what I'm grateful for.
Thank you.
Humane marketing.
Thanks so much for watching and being part of a generation of marketers who cares for yourself, for your clients, and for the planet. We really are change makers before we are marketers. So go ahead, be the change you want to see in the world. And I hope to see you again next week. Take care.